the 10th engrossment.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Stevenson, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Well, this is the bill to legalize adult use cannabis in Minnesota. Members, it's time. Minnesotans deserve the freedom and the respect to make their own decisions about cannabis use. Our current laws have failed. We have decades of data to support that conclusion. They're doing more harm than good. Minnesotans want a different approach to our cannabis laws, and this bill delivers. Now, the bill has been through 16 committee hearings just this year. That's right, I said 16 committee hearings this year, and I think probably almost every member in the chamber has had the opportunity to look at it in committee, so I won't go into the details now, but I'm looking forward to a great debate on the bill tonight.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Stevenson moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment. The amendment is coded A95.
The member from Anoka, Representative Stevenson, to your amendment.
Madam Speaker, excuse me. I'm glad we can start tonight with a little bit of levity and a little bit of gratitude. The A95 amendment says that if any police dogs are retired due to the passage of this bill, they have to be first offered to our wonderful staff. And you know, I'm not going to ask the chamber to vote on this amendment. This amendment was just really an opportunity to talk about how wonderful our staff is and how above and beyond doesn't even begin to capture the work that they did on this bill. I heard some people chuckling when the clerk reported the bill and he said it was the 10th engrossment. And for people who don't know, who are watching, that means that this is the 10th version of the bill, okay? And each time we have an engrossment, our staff have to prepare that, they have to write the amendments, they have to process them. There's so much work that goes on behind the scenes and so much work that's been done on this bill. I mentioned 16 committee hearings this year. There were 13 in 2021. This bill is the 10th engrossment. The bill in 2021 made it to the 9th engrossment. So think about the amount of work that went into that from our staff. And I want to thank every single researcher who ever touched this bill, of which there are many. I want to thank Emily Adrians, our House Fiscal Analyst, Jack Dockendorf, my LA, Simon Brown, my CA, but most of all, the incredible, the fantastic. Think about the amount of work that went into that from our staff. And I want to thank every single researcher who ever touched this bill, of which there are many. I want to thank Emily Adrians, our House Fiscal Analyst, Jack Dockendorf, my LA, Simon Brown, my CA, but most of all, the incredible, the fantastic, the wonderful Ben Johnson, the House Reacher, who's responsible for the overwhelming majority of the words in this bill. If I could give each and every one of you a puppy, I definitely would, but we're not going to do that today, so I'll withdraw the amendment.
Representative Stevenson withdraws the A95 amendment. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Baker moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment. The amendment is coded A91.
The member from Candy, Ojai, Representative Baker, to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I offer up the A91, to highlight the importance of understanding what fentanyl strips are and the need for us to get them in retail stores. As you all know, fentanyl is killing people daily in Minnesota. And we need to do a better job getting the harm reduction tools in our hands. And one of the ideas that I've been working with, again, with colleagues across the aisle, I want to thank many of you for doing that, is to make sure we put them in areas and locations that people might be most either at risk or possibly in an area where they might be using maybe alcohol alongside of other things if someone is in active use. So members, I hope this is going to be a friendly amendment to the author. This is important. We're offering fentanyl strips available in liquor stores and other fine retailers, but we want to make sure we have them for sale. This is an important part of getting in front of people where we think they're most vulnerable. So with that, I hope that our members see this as a friendly, and I look forward to hearing from our chair, Rep. Stevenson. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Sensor-Mura. Try a different microphone. Yours is not working.
This one? Okay. Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, members. Thank you, Representative Baker, for bringing this amendment. I've talked to the author of the bill, Representative Stevenson, and I would encourage members to accept this amendment. Representative Baker has spoken to the same constituents from my district that I have spoken to, who shared a very tragic story about their daughter who died from fentanyl. She was using a substance that she did not know had fentanyl in it. And that day, she had actually texted someone to say, does anyone know where I can get fentanyl strips? So, there's lots of things that we can do around harm reduction, lots of things that we can do around education about really the dangers of fentanyl, and it's in lots of substances when people don't know that. But I think in the meantime, making fentanyl strips more available, trying to remove some of the stigma around fentanyl strips is really important. I want to thank Representative Baker for making sure that this amendment is not just about dispensaries, but also, about liquor stores. We know that there's not evidence that people who are partaking in marijuana are more likely, to use a substance with fentanyl than people who are, partaking in drinking alcohol. But we need to get fentanyl strips in more places. It's one of the harm reduction measures we can do. So please vote yes for this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, the member from Isanti, Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If Representative Baker would yield for a question.
He will yield. Representative Dowd.
Baker, thanks for your leadership on these issues over the years. You really are an expert on this. And as somebody who doesn't even, you mentioned in your opening remarks that you were going to tell us what these were. I don't know. Could you tell us just a little bit about what fentanyl strips are and why they're important?
Representative Baker.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
And thank you, members, and Representative Dowd for this. Fentanyl strips are just that. They're a strip that you open up like a foil package. I have some outside of my office. If there's a little box, if you haven't seen it there, I've got a naloxone box, and I've got some fentanyl strips in there. If anybody wants to take one, just help yourself to that, along with Narcan. But I will tell you what this is it's a strip that we legalized last year so we could carry them with us, because prior to a year or two ago, they were considered paraphernalia. And we thought people that had them were using it for bad reasons or purposes of selling and testing. A fentanyl strip is a strip almost like a test strip, like you would do a pool sampling. You scratch it on a pill, you scratch it, you put it into a powder form or something. Again, I've never used one, but I've read the instructions on the back. But if you scratch it and it comes up a certain color, that means it's got fentanyl in it. You want to stay away from it. It's not perfect, because pills sometimes have fentanyl deeper inside the pills, but if people want to break it apart a little bit, they'll know it's one piece of a very complicated component to make sure people, at least if they're using this, if they're trying to do this, if they want to stay healthy and stay alive, it's another option. So we want to get them out for more. But thank you for the question, Representative Dowd.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
West moves to amend House Law Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A93.
The member from Anoka, Representative West, two-year amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A93 amendment deletes the two-driver requirement for hemp products. Currently, as we legalized in the last session, hemp edible THC is delivered to gas stations, all sorts of other stores, with the same as anything else. This bill, as it stands right now, treats it like it's some sort of incredibly dangerous narcotic. Deleting the two-driver requirement is completely reasonable. As we've already seen, it's operated in a full year of legalization with hemp edible THC, and there's no reason to have two drivers to maintain security, because it hasn't been an issue here, and it continues not to be an issue. And I hope that we can accept this amendment.
The member from Anoka, Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speakers and members. Thank you, Representative West. This is a good amendment. It's a good idea. Please vote yes.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Robbins moves to amend House Law Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded HF100.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is a simple amendment, and I hope it will be accepted. But before I forget, I'd like to ask for a roll call.
Representative Robbins requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So basically, this amendment just prohibits the director of the Office of Cannabis Management from registering as a lobbyist after they leave the position at the Office of Cannabis Management.
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, this is a good amendment, a good government perspective. I encourage a yes vote.
Any further discussion?
Thank you. I look forward to a green board.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll.
$130 now.
There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Mueller moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A106.
The member from Mauer, Representative Mueller.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And before I forget, I would like to request a roll call on the amendment, please.
Representative Mueller requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I do want to be able to just kind of read very briefly what this amendment does. It says that we are not allowed to have any type of school bus or Head Start bus, that a person who drives that bus cannot have any consumption of alcohol, and we are adding cannabis flower, cannabis product, artificially derived cannabinoid, and the big long word that I can't pronounce, which also has to do with cannabis. Now, members and Madam Speaker, we do know that right now there is no current test to make sure that we are not have any like a roadside test like we do with alcohol for cannabis that our law enforcement officers can use. Since we have such a high standard for our school bus drivers, the ones that take care of our most vulnerable, our children, and since we have such a high standard with them and an element that we already have a roadside test, seeing that we don't even have the technology to see what's going on here, I think that it is very wise and prudent for us to hold to a very high standard of making sure that we don't have any type of cannabis in our system. We've heard statistics that cannabis can stay into your system for up to 30 days. And so that means that we want to make sure that those who are going to be driving our school buses, who are in charge of our children, that they are held to the same standard as alcohol, which is zero tolerance whatsoever. So with that, members, I would ask for a green vote. Thank you.
The member from Anoka, Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Mueller, for the amendment. I'll encourage members to vote yes. In particular, I'll note that school bus drivers have commercial CDLs, which under federal rules means they can't consume cannabis. So I think this is a good amendment. I'd ask for a yes vote.
Would you still like a roll call? Representative Robbins.
Thank you, members. And I just want to rise in support of the Mueller amendment quickly. I know that there is the CDL federal requirements, but I just want to point out that these amendments were offered in committee and failed, so we want to make sure we get this on the record that we want our school bus drivers to have zero tolerance, so that's why we're asking for this amendment. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Gilman moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A109.
The member from Meeker, Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can I please request a roll call just to get things started?
Representative Gilman requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Gilman.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to explain my amendment here a little bit and why it would be very important and very proactive for Minnesota to do an environmental impact study. There is a Clark Hill packet that's been handed out or is getting handed out right now. And I'll just note some of the concerns and the side effects associated with cannabis. So pesticide usage is one that we've just done a lot with in committee and in our environment committee. And just, taking seriously the repercussions of pesticides when used next to bodies of water. It can be a direct threat to wildlife and fish. Also to consumers and employees, because it's still classified, of course, as a legal drug to the federal government. So the EPA hasn't approved any pesticides. So that's a big concern. There's land use and habitat impacts, waste management issues, water issues, and two of them being it's hard to obtain sufficient supply of water, and two, how do you process water discharges? So for an outdoor grower, one plant, guess how many gallons of water one plant would take per day to maintain a healthy, viable plant? 2? Good guess. 6 gallons a day. And this is 6 gallons a day per plant. And this is for outdoor use. We live in Minnesota. And of course, we believe that we're going to have a lot of indoor growth operations happening. So that could place a huge significant demand, as we've talked about, in sustainable infrastructure, and as we've seen in our bonding bill that's come through the House, water facilities, water treatment plants, and the chemicals coming back, as well as just needing more infrastructure. The biggest thing I want to just take a peek at real quick is the energy usage. That's on page 4. Just a quick thing, I'll talk about Denver. I won't read through it all, but I do want you to really understand the heavy use and the heavy electrical load that's going to be needed, such as UV lights, and because we're talking indoor growth, up to 16 hours per day, irrigation systems, HVAC systems, air filtering to manage the humidity and the plant organic odors, which some might really enjoy. In Denver, for example, the portion of electricity used to their grow operations doubled in the first 3 years. So after legalization, approaching 5% of their total electricity use in the whole city, which is 2.8 million people. The reason I bring this up is because we've talked a lot about climate change. We've talked about how we can combat that, how we can be responsible and be good stewards of the land. And it's estimated that 0.5 to 15 million metric tons per year will happen, which is roughly equivalent to adding 3.3 million cars to the road. So I think this is significant. I think it's being really, again, I just want to go back to this. I think it's really responsible to be proactive in Minnesota. I had a great high school page. Andrew asked me a quick question today on how come this body doesn't work together? Well, we've seen a few green boards. I wore a green shirt. We're talking about a green thing, and I'd really like you to vote green.
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Gilman. I agree with your idea that we need to focus on the environmental impacts of cannabis, which is why the bill does contain a number of provisions related to this. It includes rulemaking authority related to many of the subjects that you reference. I actually think that there is a world in which we could make an EIS make sense for this bill, but your amendment so far, I think, isn't quite there. Among other reasons, it asks for an annual EIS, so not one time or after a couple years. We want to do it every single year, and I just think that that's probably not the approach we need to take at this time. So for today, I'm asking for a no vote.
Discussion. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 70 noes, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Robbins moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A113.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think there's been a mistake. That's the Nash amendment. So I will allow him to speak to the amendment.
Representative Nash, would you like to speak to the A113?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A13 I would request a roll call on.
Representative Nash requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is very simple. In the bill, it allows for, I believe, 2 ounces to be effectively transferred without cost from one person to another. And I would like to, looking forward at some of the future bills that you have the people who are the transferor and the transferee retain a copy or a record of the transfer as described in paragraph A, and any of those attachments for future records for 20 years from the date of transfer. So I think this is by the standard that you're bringing forward to us in a bill I think is coming up one day this week. I think that that's an excellent model to see how you feel about the transfer of cannabis.
Representative Stevenson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Nash. I, too, am eager to debate the universal background check bill and look forward to that vote tomorrow. But different problems require different solutions. I'd ask for a no vote today.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. Is this one okay? There being 57 ayes and 71 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
New Brindley moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A110.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I think there are actually a lot of people in this chamber, maybe not all, but I suspect most people in this chamber would agree with decriminalizing marijuana, certainly for personal use, but decriminalizing marijuana generally. And in fact, that is in many ways effectively the policy of our state. The data that I've seen says that there are literally 34 people in prison right now for crimes related to marijuana, 34. So it is effectively decriminalized in the state of Minnesota already. However, there are still plenty of people who have marijuana crimes on their record and marijuana-related convictions on their record. And so this amendment literally gets rid of the massive atrocity that is House File 1. It deletes the vast majority of this bill, but it keeps that expungement language. It says that we are not going to criminalize substance use, and we are also going to expunge the criminal records for convictions related to possession of cannabis. And I would ask for a green vote.
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative New Brindley. I'm really glad to see the consensus building about the need to undo the harms of 50 years of failed criminal justice policy around cannabis, but we need to go further than this, and so I would ask for members to vote no. Among other reasons, I would point out that while this would allow for the expungement of current cannabis convictions, you delete the portions of the bill that prevent future cannabis convictions, so it doesn't really stop the cycle that we're on. So I'd ask for a no vote.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I just said, I mean, we effectively have a decriminalized policy in the state of Minnesota right now. So to say that it wouldn't be in effect moving forward is just not true. I mean, again, there are 34 people in the entire state of Minnesota in prison for any marijuana-related offenses, and none of the 34 are in prison exclusively for marijuana-related offenses. It's a red herring. It's just not true. It's not something that is happening now. However, it was a problem in the past, and those folks deserve that expungement. But the rest of this bill goes way too far and has far too many problems to think that House File 100 is the solution. So here is your opportunity to acknowledge that, yes, there are plenty of marijuana-related convictions that should be expunged without going to the ridiculous lengths that House File 100 goes to. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion on the amendment, the clerk will take the... All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
West moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A97.
The member from Anoka, Representative West, to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A97 amendment grandfathers in existing hemp businesses. And as this body did last session, we legalized hemp edible THC, which has demonstrated that we can have a safe, intoxicating THC market in this state. It's gone pretty well, I would say. These businesses have grown dramatically. They're employing hundreds of Minnesotans. And now, under this bill, these hemp businesses that they assumed we passed a law, and they assumed that'd be the law for more than 5 minutes, but now we have this bill that makes many of the products they currently sell illegal. It puts onerous regulations on them, and now they invested all this money, and suddenly we're changing the rules 5 minutes later. So when they invested all this money, they didn't expect this to just change. And the way the bill is written right now, we've had a lot of discussions in committee about what this does to the hemp industry. You've had a lot of testifiers in your committee, and the litany of committee stops tell you what it's going to do to their businesses. So the perfect way to deal with this, is to grandfather them in. They invested this under the law we passed last session, and I know everybody over there voted for it. So I highly expect if it's good enough last session, it should be good enough this session, and they have demonstrated that they can operate safely. Now, I don't know why that would be suddenly different, and it's incredibly unfair if you imagine that you invested $150,000 to start up a business, you hired 3 employees, and you're working to grow, and a lot of early businesses don't necessarily generate a lot of cash. So you start this up, and then the state completely introduces a 300-plus page bill that makes you're already not profitable, but this makes you incredibly non-profitable. The best way to deal with this is to grandfather those who trusted this state not to jerk them around, is to grandfather them in so they can continue to operate as they have, because they have operated safely, and there's no reason we should punish them by the way this bill stands right now. So I would ask that members support this. A vote for this amendment protects the many hemp industry stores and retailers in your districts. You've seen them. They're everywhere. And it doesn't make any sense to pass a bill just last year that is good enough, that the majority party agreed was safe. That's why they all voted for it. It doesn't make any sense to just immediately change the rules, because they've operated safely and they employ hundreds of Minnesotans, and they've been a boon for this particular industry and have demonstrated that we can have a safe and regulated market. So I'd ask members support this amendment, and I'd ask for a roll call.
Representative West requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Stevenson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative West. You know, that hemp-derived low-dose industry is, I think, a good Minnesota success story. I think they're doing great and exciting things, and I think we all want them to continue to prosper and grow, or most people want them to continue to prosper and grow, and I think that we've done some great work on that, including your earlier amendment tonight. I think this amendment goes too far. I think there are some important regulations that this would exempt these businesses from, and I would encourage members to vote no, but we can continue to work, hopefully, on this issue as we go forward.
Representative West.
Would Representative Stevenson yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative West.
I know you voted for this last time. What has particularly changed that you thought it was appropriate to legalize this, legalize hemp edible THC as it is now, but suddenly that's not good enough? What changed between now and then?
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative West. Yeah, I still think it should be legal. I just think that we have some guard rules that we can put on based on our experiences that have gone along. I think it makes sense. I think this is an appropriate path that we're taking.
Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That just seems like a pretty slipshod lawmaking. I guess you can blame your former majority leader for that one. I ask that members vote yes on this amendment.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Just to go back through little memory lane there. So industrial hemp has an interesting history through this body. And the member that is well known for pushing this movement is former State Representative Phyllis Kahn. And I have to say, when I first got elected in the Ag Committee, she presented her bill, and she had these nice little truffles that were made with hemp. And I was a little leery because I didn't know too much about industrial hemp at that time. And the more that I dug in and the more that I learned about it, and the more that I got to know Representative Phyllis Kahn, I jumped on the hemp bandwagon. And we worked pretty hard so that I was elected in 10, so 11, 12, and then 13, 14 is when we really pushed this legislation forward. And in fact, I had to do a lot of educating for my district, my previous district at that time, because there was a whole lot of people that thought that I was going to be bringing the drug lords to Douglas and Otter Tail County, and I had to do a lot of educating on industrial hemp. There was even a endorsement challenge because of industrial hemp. As you can see, I won that endorsement challenge. But then it was 15. I pushed forward. A lot of people thought, are you going to leave the industrial hemp alone? I said, oh, no. Won my election. We are going to push forward. So Representative Phyllis Kahn and I authored the legislation. She signed on, I think, as a second co-author. And when the Republicans brought forward their ag bill, there was going to be no amendments on the industrial hemp because the Republicans didn't want to put money on it. So Representative Phyllis Kahn and I put our heads together, and we came up with a nice little, Representative Phyllis Kahn, you're going to offer the amendment, and we're going to take money from the AURI program to fund the industrial hemp program. And if Representative Kahn authored the amendment, then my side of the aisle couldn't yell at me for offering an amendment they didn't want to accept onto the bill. So that's how that happened. The amendment went on to the bill, and we got industrial hemp legalized here in the state of Minnesota. And so, all that hard work, working with the hemp growers over the years and making hemp a reality, to see that the hard work that Representative Phyllis Kahn and I did being bastardized through legalized marijuana really saddens my heart. And so I really do hope that the body rethinks their vote on this and supports Representative West's amendment.
The member from Pope, Representative Anderson.
Madam Speaker and members, this is a serious issue. I recall when this bill was heard in the Ag Committee. Usually we don't pack the House in the Ag Committee, but the day this bill was heard, we had standing room only. And I was expecting to hear support after support for the bill, but I was surprised. As I recall, there were probably, 5 or 6 hemp farmers who testified against the bill because of their concern with what Representative West mentioned, that their business would be very much adversely impacted by some of the provisions of this marijuana bill. I recall such things as depreciation. They couldn't depreciate equipment, things like that. Banking was an issue. So yes, I support the West Amendment because we have a growing hemp industry in this state, and they would like to be kept outside of the regulations of this marijuana bill. So I would encourage a green vote on the West Amendment.
Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Anderson brings up a really good point that I would like the chair to yield for a question, please.
He will yield. Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Stevenson, Representative Anderson brings up a very important point about when we pass this bill, there's a big concern about hemp being able to continue their depreciation schedule that they currently have. And I would like to know how you believe this bill affects that.
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative West, I don't believe it impacts the depreciation schedule, and I think it's important to understand the bill says nothing about industrial hemp or hemp growing, manufacturing. If you're using hemp to make topicals or fiber or anything else, none of that is affected by this bill at all.
Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if he would yield for one more question.
He will yield. Representative West.
I expect this amendment might not do so well, but I would like to know, do you plan on working with the hemp industry to make sure we improve this bill in conference committee?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, Representative West, I'm always looking to improve my bills.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 54 ayes and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
West moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A94.
Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, if you're watching from home, you might be excited that, hey, we're going to legalize recreational cannabis. This is great. This is what I wanted. But this bill isn't just legalizing recreational cannabis. It contains a litany of, frankly, far-left ideology. So when you apply for a license, you'd expect them to make sure you have a well-operating business with a good profit and loss statement and a good security plan so that you can operate well. And this bill does have that. But there's a specific mandate in the bill that requires a social equity score. So they score your license on whether you get a license or not on your social equity status. And you might ask yourself, what does that even mean? Well, number one, in section 17, so page 43 if you're following along, says if you're convicted of a cannabis-related offense prior to the effective date of this chapter. Well, actually, that's pretty good. I think it would be great if we can repair the damage that was unnecessarily done to certain families. A service-disabled veteran and National Guard, as well as any military veteran, National Guard, who lost honorable status due to a cannabis-related offense. Well, I certainly would like to see them benefited as well. And there's a resident in a community of the last 5 years that was disproportionately impacted by cannabis enforcement. Well, that sounds pretty good too. Or you're in an area with a poverty rate greater than 20%. And you got to ask, well, now we're straying from a well-operating business. We're targeting putting cannabis businesses in areas in high poverty. That's not ideal. You got to realize that these cannabis businesses in states where it's legalized, even legal cannabis business, is a cash business, which means they literally, the reason we have the 2-driver amendment exception for hemp is because they don't have this problem. But the reason there is a 2-driver requirement for cannabis is because they drive around loads and loads and loads of cash. And that has made them a target for burglary in many states. So I understand that your social equity ideology is saying, oh, let's make sure we put these in those areas. But you're not helping these communities by putting a cash business in those areas. You're inviting more crime. You're making their lives worse. Now, we can do something to help them, but if you judge their license and whether they're allowed to operate a business on where they're from, well, that doesn't make any, that's ideological. That's not real policy making. That's fantasy land. We should be ensuring that those who apply for licenses can operate an effective business, and that should be the priority, especially considering we've seen major burglaries in many states that have legalized recreational cannabis because it's a cash business. This kind of woke stuff is not what people thought when they thought the DFL was going to legalize recreational cannabis. They thought, hey, I can go buy weed now. This is great. I can't wait. But now you have this weird social equity ideology shoved into this where it has no business being. If you want to legalize cannabis, let's do it in a way that actually makes sense. You're hurting these communities by doing this. They can still get a license fair and square by operating an effective business plan, by stacking the deck and choosing winners and losers. It's unfair to other people applying for the licenses, but it also makes those communities worse that you're trying to help. So this needs to come out of the bill. And this is one of the things where you would have broad support. And especially, I know you have some trouble in the Senate. This is one of the biggest things that's a barrier there. Rather than hurting these communities, let them apply for a license, but, well, they can compete on their own merits. They don't need this kind of deck stacking that's unfair and puts a target for burglary in communities that are already having a difficult time in this present environment. So I'd encourage your support of this amendment.
Representative Stevenson. Oh, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Speaker. Members, I could say so much about the issues that I have with this amendment, but I'm going to mention just two things. First, on a value premise, deleting social equity from this bill after Minnesotans have overwhelmingly asked us to be sure that our legal market is equitable for the people who were most harmed by prohibition would be irresponsible. We would be going against what the vast majority of Minnesotans who contributed to this 3+ year conversation have asked us to do. Lastly, just on a basic policy premise, this amendment offers no definition for the term in need of economic stimulus like there is for the definition of a social equity applicant. This is absolutely not what Minnesotans have asked us to do as we stand up the best model for full legalization in the country. There is every moral reason to keep this in our bill, so I would ask you for a no vote.
Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Hansen yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative West.
So in the latest poll of Minnesota, 53% of Minnesotans support legalization, which I agree. The majority of Minnesotans support legalization. Where do you come up with overwhelmingly Minnesotans support legalization with the social equity ideology?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Representative West. As a former leader in the cannabis community, I traveled the state for a number of years talking to Minnesotans border to border. Our previous majority leader in our caucus did the same, traveled around the state talking to Minnesotans about what they wanted to see out of a legal industry. And what I was taught is that the world's run by people who show up. And the people who showed up to make sure their voices were heard on this bill were overwhelmingly asking us to continue to pursue justice. And that's what defining social equity applicants do in a good legal market.
Representative West.
So the people who show up to a Democratic event support Democratic policies is all that means. That's not what Minnesotans want. Only 53% in the latest survey support it. 36% oppose it. The vast majority don't really care. So it's incredibly disingenuous to say that they overwhelmingly support this unfair left-wing ideology licensing scheme. That is absolutely untrue. And the worst part is that it harms the communities that this is supposed to help. And we want to help those communities. They can get a license same as everyone, but by targeting it in areas where this is going to be an issue, where it's a cash business, is actively harmful to what you're trying to do. And Minnesotans definitely don't overwhelmingly support that. Thank you.
Member from Dakota, Representative Koznick.
Thank you, members. Representative West, I appreciate bringing this amendment forward. We talked about this in a couple of the committees where this bill came before us in the state government finance and I believe the economic development. What I heard from across the aisle is that, this is a payback to campaign supporters is really what it is, that only you're going to be able to get licenses if you support us. And I think that is a moral reason to oppose this provision in the bill. And it's further evidence that this bill is not ready for Minnesota. This bill is not ready for Minnesota when it's picking winners and losers and who gets to participate in the economic opportunity of cannabis. Minnesotans that support cannabis didn't say, I support cannabis only if certain favored people, select people, can be buyers on the wholesale or retail level. In fact, I know a guy in my district, longtime marketing guy, that's his main career, or his only career right now, but he decided he was gonna maybe hedge a little bit and explore further capitalistic entrepreneurial opportunities, and below his marketing business, he opened up a CBD shop. And he's been losing money for 3 years already. But because of use of his own capital, his own knowledge, he's educated himself on these issues and the cannabis and the hemp, and he's making a bet or taking on the capitalistic risk to be able to one day expand use of his shop to also include cannabis products. But because of this bill that's not ready for Minnesota, but because of this bill that favors some and not others, he's going to continue to lose money and be prohibited from participating in this market. That's not American. That's not Minnesotan. This bill is not ready for Minnesota because of this provision and so many other provisions similar to it and others in this bill. Some people might say that Minnesota is ready for cannabis, but this bill isn't ready for Minnesota.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Hansen J. yield to a question.
She will. Representative Franson.
Thank you, Representative Hansen. So this is very interesting to me, this dialogue on where people want to put cannabis stores up. Could you, this body has done a lot of discussions about payday loans being in low-income areas, liquor stores being in low-income areas, as well as there's discussions on even dollar stores popping up in low-income areas, and people feel that is predatory as well. Could you explain to the body, like, what is the difference of, you know, having cannabis stores in low-income areas, and just help us understand, like, I see that as predatory myself. Could you walk us through your line of thinking?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Representative Franson. As somebody who grew up in poverty, I'm happy to talk about what it's like. We're just like everybody else. We consume a healing plant, there's liquor stores, a lot of times there's food deserts. It's hard there. So every opportunity for economic development matters. And for anybody else who grew up in poverty, you'll know that there are probably some legacy cannabis businesses in a lot of areas of poverty. And making sure that we are prioritizing and giving people opportunities to profit from a business that has intentionally harmed Black and brown people for a number of years, and Black and brown people who are disproportionately represented in communities experiencing poverty. This is important. It's important to make sure that we are doing our part to right the wrongs of the past. And deleting social equity applicants from this bill is not the way to go about it.
Representative Franson. Further discussion? Any further discussion? Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Hansen yield to a question?
She will yield. Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It has just occurred to me that I only addressed your first statement, which was that people overwhelmingly support it, and really Democrats overwhelmingly support Democrat policies, as you mentioned. But this isn't the broad swath of Minnesotans. Minnesotans support cannabis legalization, as do I, but this social equity program is not it. But my question is the second point you brought up. There's no definition of being in need of fiscal stimulus, or what is the consequence of that not having a definition?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Representative West. I just want to first say that it's not just Democrats that support Democrat policies. As a leader in this movement, there were thousands of people that participated in our events, in our movement, in our rallies, and in lobbying the members of this chamber and the other to make sure that we could advance a policy that works for everybody. And I guarantee you, many people in the organization I worked with were certainly not Democrats. So it was not just Democrats who supported this policy, just to set that record straight. And the lack of the inclusion of a definition for something in a policy means that it is left up to whoever is interpreting that law to define that. And I think I've heard over and over in this body in my couple of years here that we want to be sure bills are ready for prime time. That's a common thing I hear a lot of people say. And I've been in a position where my bill has lacked a definition, and I've been asked by my colleagues to make sure I include that. And so I think that's a fair and responsible way to make sure we're advancing public policy.
Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So there is no consequence, and that's why I agree. It's just in need of fiscal stimulus. The Office of Cannabis can determine with that what they will, and we can make sure we help people. But the social equity portion of this bill is just woke nonsense that is completely unnecessary. We can legalize cannabis without doing this complete and total nonsense. So I'd urge members to support this amendment.
All those in favor of the amendment, in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Baker moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A99.
The member from Candy, Ojai, Representative Baker.
Thank you, members and Madam Speaker. This is an important amendment I want you to, we'll have some conversation about here. My amendment is asking you to consider raising the age of 21 to the age of 25. And this is an important one, so I want you to understand why this is so important. We have heard through the last 10, 15, 20 years with the really diving in deep with the opioid epidemic and how it is affecting people that went in for an opioid pill with an injury, and it's affecting and how it has affected people that still have a developing brain. And science, if you're a science person, this is where you need to listen to what the scientists are saying. Anybody under the age of 25? Thank you. Anybody under the age of 25 is extremely susceptible to a far greater negative outcome when you're using a substance that is affecting the neurons in the brain. So I'm asking members to please consider raising the legal age of this bill to 25 from 21, and I want to make sure that we do it in a way that let's get it right out of the gate, because if it goes in now at 21, it ain't changing. But we know more today than we did back in the 30s when we decided alcohol ought to be 21. So just because we're doing it, because that's the way alcohol is teed up, and that's what we're used to, let's be that state that recognizes what we know today to be way more cognizant of how dangerous this is for somebody with a brain that's not developed. So I hope members look at this important amendment to recognize this for our youth going forward. Thank you.
Discussion. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, my friend Representative Baker. I appreciate this amendment. And while we receive research that tells us more and more about brain development every day, it's important to note that we allow 21-year-olds to legally consume toxins like alcohol, nicotine, and tobacco. We allow 18-year-olds to gamble, join the military, work in dangerous facilities, and to serve those toxins to other people. And in my opinion, one of the more dangerous, get married, right? Unless and until we are going to stop all potentially life-altering decisions from happening before 25, we really can't start with cannabis. Because as a reminder, cannabis has no lethal dose on its own. It's a non-toxic substance on its own, unlike things that we already have in our society. Also, our goal is to shut down the legacy cannabis industry and to bring things above board. And this would hinder our goal in that mission and would contribute pretty significantly to actually keeping the legacy market alive and relevant for those who are under 25, because I'm the mom of an 18-year-old and I can tell you that they absolutely have unfeathered access to cannabis right now. We have no idea the amounts, we have no idea about a lot of the things in it. And so if we're really serious about making sure that we're protecting our kids through a regulated and legal safe market, then that means that we pass this bill today. Thank you. I'd ask for a no vote.
Discussion. The member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise in support of the Baker Amendment. Thank you, Representative Baker, for not only this amendment, but for your hard work on opioid addiction, the fentanyl crisis. You have been a leader in this state for a long time on these issues, and I appreciate it. Members, we have passed out a number of things tonight. One is letters in opposition that is about substance use disorders and health concerns. And then another piece that I just sent around now, Minnesota Ducks, please limit the harm from legal pot. And I'd like you to just take a minute, members, and look through those. I know we get a ton of paper around here, but these are really important opinions to consider. The one that's from the Minnesota docs asking us to limit the legal harm from pot, this is by William Nicholson. He is the president of the Minnesota Medical Association. So this isn't Representative Robbins, this isn't Representative Baker, this is the president of the Minnesota Medical Association saying that we should not legalize it for people under 25. Research has, I'm quoting, research has consistently shown that human brain development and maturation is not complete until the age of 25. Therefore, individuals under 25 should be prohibited from purchasing, possessing, or using cannabis and cannabis-infused products. The Minnesota Psychiatric Association sent a significant, very dense opinion piece with a lot of citations talking about the dangers for brain development, for depression, anxiety, and psychosis for people under age 25. And we heard testimony, and I'm sure you guys have also received the emails of people who have gone into psychotic episodes because of cannabis use and committed suicide. I have a mom who regularly emails me because this was what happened to her son, and she is begging us not to do this. Another piece that's really important to check out is from the Minnesota Society of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. They are also recommending that we do not legalize cannabis products for under age 25, and they go through some very detailed discussion of how it affects the synapses in our brains and can result in long-term psychosis and depression and anxiety. Members, our young people in our state and around the nation are in a mental health crisis, and this will exacerbate it. And there are reams of studies about the impact of cannabis use on young people's brains. And so I know alcohol is 21, I understand the arguments, but this science is here in front of us, and we didn't have it back then. And so, members, we need to help our young people, and I support this amendment. Thank you, Representative Baker.
Further discussion, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Thank you, Representative Robbins, for pointing out many of the things in the packet that members were given. These are the smartest people on this issue about how it affects others. You need to pay attention to this stuff because we do nationally with SAMHSA, we do nationally with the RX summits that we've been attending, and the understanding of just substance use disorder and how much pain has gone through families of young ones and kids that have tried this, they've gotten addicted, and they've lost so much time, members, when you're 17, 18 through 23, 24, and they almost kind of like are sitting in the parking lot for a few years at a critical time in their life. So our professionals in the world, our Hazelton Friends, Project Turnabout, members from March that are looking at this every day, they're saying that is a critical piece of information. You're sitting here today thinking about passing a cannabis bill, recreational marijuana, with no THC limits when it comes with the flower. There are hybrids that are really potent. This is a new kind of a marijuana. And I don't know why you won't seriously consider this request to start out the state of Minnesota at 25 years old. Be that state that takes it slow. Be the state that says, you know what, we know this today, and we know it better today than we did even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when other states were really rolling into this. Don't do it just because alcohol is at 21. Don't do it because it'll be easier for the retailers and the dispensaries. Because you know, when it comes to the argument of the black market or the illegal market, as Representative Hansen was mentioning, it's not going away either way. It's going to be around. And the closer we get to 21 means the closer it's going to get down to the 17, 18, 16-year-olds. But 25, I think, I remember when I was 25, I was married then. I was certainly not ready for that 19, 20, 21. There was a big transformation at that point. We learned a lot in those few years in that 20 to 25 range. Members, the two most important letters in the packet are the ones from the parents that just reached out to me at the last minute. And if there were 100 families standing in this room, all lined up, and they were to ask the question about what should we do with this age thing, 95 out of 100, first of all, 95 out of 100 would say, we don't want this bill passed, period. But 98 out of 100 would say, at least listen to the stats. Don't go below the age of 25 because we know clearly now our kids found something earlier in life and it affected them much greater than they ever imagined. The one responsible thing to do here, members, is to take this amendment to conference. Taking it to conference allows us to talk about it further. Of every amendment I've ever carried on a bill like this, this is one of the most important because I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference. That 4 years from 21 to 25 will make all the difference in the world. I don't know why we can't take this to conference. Because once this gets out at that age of 21, nothing will change it as bad as things will get. The black market isn't going to go away. It hasn't on any other state. It's not going to here in Minnesota. So members, look at the packet. Look at what families are saying. Look at what our providers are saying. Madam Speaker, I think I forgot. I want a roll call on this, please.
Representative Baker requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
With our green or red votes, we can see who's paying attention to what the families are saying. We can pay attention to what we're hearing in committee. Chair Fisher, when we were in our committee this year, we heard a lot about this. We heard a lot about the 25 as a magical number. Please support what our professionals, what the science are saying. Please vote green on making the age to 25. Let's take it to conference and keep talking about it. Thank you, members.
Any further discussion on the Baker Amendment? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 57 ayes and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Robbins moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A101.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This amendment simply deletes the money for the workforce grants and reallocates the appropriation to drug recognition experts. We had extensive conversation earlier and will again about the lack of a threshold or a standard for impairment with marijuana, and also there is no roadside test available to test for intoxication. So given that, one of the reasons the Sheriff's Association and MPPOA and other law enforcement agencies oppose this bill is because there are studies that show it increases fatal crashes and injury crashes. There's a study from the National Insurance Institute that says crashes for injury accidents were up 6%, and fatal crashes were up 4% in the states that have legalized marijuana. Our fiscal note, however, refers to a Canadian study that shows crashes in Canada, fatal crashes, not just injury crashes. Fatal crashes are up 15%, members. So if we are going to be able to deal with the onslaught of harm from impairment and driving while impaired, we need more drug recognition experts to be trained for the state patrol and local police. And my police chief in Maple Grove and other chiefs put together some language about what that would need, and they expected about 250 new drug recognition experts on the low end, and they expected it would cost about $10 million. And I know that the bill does appropriate $10 million in the first year for the State Patrol, which is great, and $5 million in the second. But I guess I just have a question for the author, if he would yield.
He will yield. Representative Robbins.
Thank you. So thank you, Chair Stevenson. We've had these discussions before, but where I'm having trouble is there is the appropriation in the bill that's not really specific to drug recognition experts, but the fiscal note takes $6 million from the Trunk Highway Fund that would provide for 5 drug recognition experts in the State Patrol, and then it provides $40,000 for training 200 officers, which is incredibly low. So how do you square the $10 million in appropriation with how the fiscal note says we're going to actually provide for drug recognition experts?
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Robbins. The fiscal note predates the adoption of the amendment in Ways and Means, where we had appropriated $10 million in the first year and $5 million ongoing, which explains that discrepancy. I would just note the fiscal note does clarify how much it costs to train a drug recognition expert. It's 4 hours. They approximate it would cost $50 an hour, so we're basically talking about $200 per drug recognition expert. And then, as it mentions, there's the instructor time as well. So if you think about $10 million, that will fund an awful lot of drug recognition experts. This, I will note, is the amount that members of the minority asked for in several committees, and we did adopt it in the Ways and Means Committee because I thought it was a good idea, and which is why I still think that that's the correct appropriation.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for that explanation, Chair Stevenson. And I do appreciate that the money is there, but when you look at the language of the bill, it really does not say for drug recognition experts. And the fiscal note, which I do have the most recent version of it, still says 5 drug recognition experts. So I would like to request a roll call on this because I think it's very important that we specify where this money is going to go. So thank you, members.
Representative Robbins requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Further discussion. Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Robbins, I'm just puzzled by the comment that the amendment, the language doesn't specify that. I'm looking at subdivision 21 of Article 9, starting on line 297.30, and it says $10 million in fiscal 24 is appropriated for drug evaluation and classification program for drug recognition, evaluator training, additional phlebotomist, drug recognition training for peace officers as defined in Minnesota statutes, and so on. So I think it is pretty explicit in that section of the bill. As I mentioned, this is the amount that the minority offered in several committees and that we adopted in Ways and Means. I think it's the correct amount. The money that you're appropriating comes from the grant programs, which will help drive the industry, and so I would ask members to vote no.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I do appreciate the additional funding, Chair Stevenson, and I do appreciate the clarification, but just to be clear that the section you were reading from says the $10 million goes for lots of things, including drug evaluation and classification program for drug recognition, evaluator training, additional phlebotomists, recognition training for peace officers, and I believe setting up more toxology things. So I just want to make sure that we put the money where it's most effective, and that's the reason I'm asking for a green vote. Thank you, members.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Robbins moves to amend House File number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A104.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The A104 sets a potency cap. And I think this is very important that we have this discussion. So currently, as we've discussed, there is no test for impairment, and there is no standard of what impairment is. And as Representative Baker alluded to in his discussion of his amendment, the nature of marijuana has changed substantially. In the 1960s and 70s, marijuana was generally had a potency of 1 to 3% THC. Today's marijuana flower plant, because of breeding and other things, has now been 15 to 17%, but up to as high as 30% THC. And in addition, there are now waxes and concentrates that are extremely high concentration of THC. Back in 2008, concentrates averaged 6.7% THC. Now for edibles, they average 56% THC, but are often much higher. And in the vapes and the waxes, it can be to 90% THC. So members, these high concentration of ways to access THC are extremely harmful, back to the under 25, especially to developing brains. And I won't read all the things in the packet, but I really encourage you to look at it, members. The Minnesota Psychiatric Association, the Minnesota Child and Adolescent Psychiatric Association, the other groups I mentioned earlier, they all talk about this, and they all request a potency cap, as does the head of the Minnesota Medical Association. This is not just something that Republicans are asking for. This is what our medical professionals in our state are asking for. And so, members, we did not successfully limit this to 25 and under. I mean, to stop it for 25 and under. So since you didn't take that amendment, I am asking you to please take a potency amendment. We really need to limit the access that our young people are going to have to these high potency THC levels, because it really is harmful to their brain development. Thank you.
The member from Anoka, Representative Cagle.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So bear with me here for a few minutes. I, at age 12, started getting really sharp pains in my legs and made it hard for me to stand for more than a few minutes. Cool thing about that is, I got excused early for the lunch line, so I didn't have to wait for very long. Not so cool thing about that is when you're a 13-year-old girl in a body cast for a month, that kind of makes you stand out a little bit. End of my 7th grade year, I had my first of 3 back surgeries. I had 13 years between my first one and my second one, but between that first one and second one, my doctors told me about this great new pain medication that could help me live a normal life. I was about 22 years old when I was first given Vicodin by my doctors. After a few years, Vicodin wasn't enough to keep my pain at bay, and so my doctor gave me these handy-dandy 25 milligram fentanyl patches. So, for most of my 20s, yeah, that was kind of my life. So pre-ACA then, I was denied health insurance because of this wonderful pre-existing condition that I had. So not only was I denied the care I needed, but then I also couldn't afford the pain medication that helped me make it through the day. So the fentanyl was the more expensive one, so I let that one go. 2 more back surgeries later, things were fine as long as I had my Vicodin pills with me. I wanted to start a family, didn't think that that was a good thing to be doing while I was trying to have a baby. So after about 1.5 years of tapering, I got off of all opioids. Fast forward a few years, my back starts bothering me again. I'm taking 800 milligrams of ibuprofen a day, sleeping on ice packs while I'm chasing a toddler around. Then I do something really fun and cut my fingers off. So after that, after my accident and many of my follow-up appointments with my surgeon, I asked about the medical cannabis program, and she suggested I give it a try. In the 60s, our doctors weren't telling us about the benefits of cannabis. And so through trial and error, I found the product that best worked for me, not only to manage my back pain, but to reduce swelling, to help with a lot of the, helping my joints up and moving in the morning, and then helping me sleep at night. And the product that helps me the most has 85% potency. And so this amendment really kind of it worries me because I want to make sure that I'm able to get the medicine that works best for my pain while not giving me the horrible side effects that the fentanyl and the Vicodin did. So I urge members to oppose this amendment. Thank you.
Discussion. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Cagle, for sharing that story. And I've always been a strong supporter of the medical cannabis program, and I think it is working well, and I'm glad to hear it's working for you. But members, this is not about the medical cannabis program. This is about what we are legalizing and the high levels of concentration, primarily that young people will get through vaping and through waxes and oils. And members, I don't know where in the packet it is, but there's an article from the New York Times as well about this new phenomenon that's out there that's caused by these high concentrations where kids get something called I'm going to forget the name of it now, hyperemesis syndrome caused by cannabis. And they go into violent periods of throwing up, and they cannot stop, and they get hospitalized. Members, these high levels of concentration are what are contributing significantly to the psychosis episodes that our young people are seeing. So for people who benefit from it, there is the medical cannabis program, and I'm glad it's there and available. But for people who will just be getting cannabis through the retail outlets, I really think we need to have this guardrail around it. So please vote green.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Robbins moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A105.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And before I forget, I want to request a roll call.
Representative Robbins requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is the A105, which prohibits public transit drivers from having marijuana in their systems. It's similar to the school bus amendment that Representative Mueller carried. Again, this amendment was rejected in the Transportation Committee, and we want to make sure that we are on record as a body of having zero tolerance for our Metro Transit bus drivers and light rail drivers and people who drive Metro Transit dial-a-rides and Metrolink services, that we do not want to have them impaired. There is no, as I've said many times, no level of impairment, no standard of impairment in the bill, and no tests for impairment. So we cannot risk our public who are traveling in our Metro Transit system by having impaired drivers. Please vote green.
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Robbins, I think if this amendment was just confined to transit, it'd be one conversation. But as I'm looking at line 1.4 of this amendment, it says it's a crime for any person to operate a motor vehicle or vehicle that operates on rail to provide public transit. So I think this amendment would apply to anyone who's driving a motor vehicle. That does not work. We've had a discussion here before about how cannabis is detectable in your blood long after impairment, which is why we have not adopted a zero tolerance basis for motor vehicles. That's a position that's supported by the nonpartisan DWI task force, among many other groups. So I'd ask for a no vote on the A105.
Further discussion. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Stevenson. I had not had that objection to this in earlier discussions, but clearly the statement is, it is a crime for any person to operate a motor vehicle or vehicle that operates on rail to provide public transit. So the operative phrase is to provide public transit. So it's whether you're driving a motor vehicle providing public transit or operating a rail vehicle that provides public transit, but it modifies both. So that is really not legitimate argument, and we need to make sure that everyone who's riding public transit, no matter whether it's a vehicle or a rail car, is safe. So please vote green. Thank you.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Stevenson. That's not even, you're an attorney. Read the whole sentence. It literally says to provide public transit as defined in section 174.22. This is specifically only for those people who are providers of public transit and operators of public transit. This is a good vote and we should be taking it, and don't let that excuse by the author or misinterpretation or misrepresentation of this amendment by the author sway your vote.
Further discussion. Representative Robbins.
Thank you. And to further amplify that point, I just want members to know that the section is entitled Cannabis-Related Transit Operations, and where it's a gross misdemeanor cannabis-related transit operation and a misdemeanor cannabis-related transit operation. In every instance, it's referred to as transit operation. Vote green.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Robbins moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A114.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This amendment prohibits the Commissioner of Revenue from purchasing, leasing, or taking occupancy of a building for purposes of providing a facility to collect cash payments. And there's nothing in the bill that talks specifically about the Department of Revenue setting up basically a place to process cash payments. But when we were in the tax committee, this came out, and I just was fascinated. The Department of Revenue, according to the fiscal note on page 133, wants to spend $1 million in the first year and then ongoing operations to have an off-site facility to collect cash payments. And when I asked about that, they said, oh, well, we're probably going to work it out and it won't be in the next iteration of the bill. But it was in the next iteration, and it was in the next iteration of the fiscal note. So maybe they're still working it out, but I want to make sure that as a body, since it hasn't been worked out, we prohibit this. I found the fiscal note quite interesting, members, about why they want to do this. And so they assume that state chartered banks will not work with the cash businesses who need to process their payments. And they also assume, obviously, it's illegal for federal banks to do it. And they also don't want it to happen at the actual Department of Revenue because they have concerns about the need for better security and safety for revenue staff and customers, the perception of the public stemming from the association with cannabis, and there's less traffic for customers to the location because it potentially won't be located downtown. It's going to be in one of our districts. And it will reduce the internal risk involving potential disclosure of and personal association of the people who work at Department of Revenue with this cash business. Because as we heard earlier, an all-cash business, as Representative West was talking about, brings crime. And they particularly point out that this is what Oregon is doing. Oregon has a state cash facility. And in the state of Oregon, state banks did not want to accept the funds, which is potentially going to happen in Minnesota as well. This requires large amounts of cash to be paid for cannabis returns. In Oregon, the paying parties regularly showed up fully armed. This would cause numerous concerns at the Department of Revenue. I'm sure it would. We also don't want fully armed people showing up in our districts or in the neighborhoods where these retail shops are being paid in huge sums of cash. There will be crime increases, as the revenue note suggests. So members, this clearly just states that even though the bill is silent on this, that we do not want this to be happening, and at least until there's a much more full and public discussion of this. So members, I urge a green vote on stopping the setting up of a cash facility until we have better information, or at least understand what their intentions are. Thank you. Oh, and I'd like a roll call.
Representative Robbins requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Robbins. As you are correct, the bill is silent as to this issue, and I think it should stay that way. So I'll ask for a no vote on the bill. We are seeing more and more financial institutions engage with the cannabis business across the country, and in fact, there's federal legislation pending that would allow federally backed institutions to engage in this behavior. I encourage you to talk to your local congressman about how helpful that would be, but I think that there's wide expectation that state-backed financial institutions will engage with cannabis businesses, and that most of the returns will be done electronically, obviating the need for this facility anyway, but I don't think that we should ban it. I'd ask for a no vote.
Further discussion. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, members, I am not comfortable leaving this in. The bill is silent on it, and apparently the chair wants it to stay silent on it, which I find interesting. I think taxpayers would want to know that the state is setting up a cash processing facility that will cost $1 million in the first year and $400,000 and some ongoing every year thereafter. So I think we need more transparency, and I urge a green vote. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Robbins moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A100.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is the local control amendment. I, like probably most of you, have heard from many of my cities and the counties that really they are very frustrated with the lack of local control in this bill. And I appreciate that Chair Stevenson has made some strides from the original version of the bill to where we are now to give a little bit of a nod to local control, but it's certainly not what the cities and the counties would like. And so basically this, under the current bill, cities cannot regulate the number of licenses in their jurisdiction like they do with liquor, and cities cannot revoke a license like they can with liquor. They can suspend a license, but they cannot revoke a license. They have to just complain to the Office of Cannabis Management and hope that the Office of Cannabis Management agrees with them. Furthermore, there are some restrictions in the bill. It can't be within 1,000 feet of a school or a park that has a playground or a couple other things, but it doesn't mention churches. It doesn't have anything to do with odors or hours, that kind of thing. So this is a good amendment. It empowers your cities to do what their citizens want. So I urge a green vote, and I ask for a roll call.
Representative Robbins requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion. Representative Stevenson.
Oh, well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Robbins. There's a series of amendments we'll be taking up now that have to do with local control. So I'll just say generally that the bill tries to strike a careful balance between allowing local unit governments to do the enforcement work that's necessary, allowing them to set hours, allowing them to restrict its location with regard to schools, for example, allowing them a number of pieces of local control, but not allowing an opt-out. And for example, when we talk about revoking licenses, we are careful to not give give them the power to revoke, though they can suspend, because we don't want local units of governments to opt out by revoking licenses without good reason. We don't want opt-outs by having very restrictive zoning requirements, by having very restrictive licensing fees, which is why the licensing fee is specifically articulated in that local units of governments can charge. So there's a careful balance in the bill that has been maintained between having some local control but not enough to allow local units of governments to opt out. Why are we focused on not having the opt-outs? Because in states that have allowed opt-outs, that's where the illicit market continues to thrive and grow. We need to have a uniform set of cannabis standards across the state to make sure that we're doing the best we can to curb the illicit marketplace and move to a legitimate marketplace with consumer protections and controls. So I don't support the A100 amendment and the other amendments that have to do with allowing for opt-outs.
Any further discussion? Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I urge a green vote. Our cities want local control. They have asked for it. The little bit of progress that we've made is not enough. The citizens elect their city councils and their mayors to make these decisions so that it fits local culture, local sensibilities. And we saw that one size does not fit all in the pandemic, and we certainly don't want to have something like cannabis forced on our individual cities if they don't want it. If they want it, they can certainly, embrace it, but not everyone will want it. And as for it's sort of a red herring about the illegal market. I do understand your point, Chair Stevenson, but the bill is in effect creating the illegal market by allowing people to give away 2 ounces to anyone 21 or older at any time and growing up to 4 flowering plants, 8 plants total at home, and keeping 1.5 pounds of cannabis in your home anytime. So we are, by the way the bill is allowing for, it's not, the proponents of the bill like to say, oh, well, we're regulating, we're testing, we're having retail licenses, it's going to be very regulated. That part is regulated. But when you can give away 2 ounces to anyone at any time who's over age 21, and you can have 1.5 pounds in your home, that is where the illegal market is going to come from, whether we have local control or not. And just so members understand how much this is, 2 ounces is enough for 168 joints, members. 1.5 pounds that you can keep in your home is enough for 2,043 joints, which would be the equivalent of 6 a day. No one's going to keep that much in their home, and no one's going to pass that around. Members, the bill itself is creating the illegal market, and we should be able to empower our cities to have local control. Please vote green.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Representative Robbins, for this. This is a really important one, and I hope you're paying attention to the need to bring this home to our local leaders that really actually care about this. We really did a poor job, the legislature did last session, to roll out, the edible cannabis, really messed it up, didn't give them any direction, no taxing, just nothing. And all we're asking for now is give us a chance to sort of set up our own system here, if it's 1 or 2, but you're not going to force them to not deny anybody. Let me remind you, there's still going to be a black market here after this bill passes. It's going to happen. No other state has stopped it. So don't think that what you're doing here today is going to stop it either. But why not give our local folks a little bit more credibility, a little bit more respect to allow them to set up what's important in that community? Come on, members, this is a local control thing that you should get behind. We're going to need their help to do this right. And they know their communities better than anybody. Please support the Robbins Amendment. Thank you very much for bringing this forward. Let's do this for our local little towns. Thank you.
Discussion. Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As we have been debating this, I have local people that are texting me right now from my community, constituents, and thank you for this amendment, Representative Robbins. I would like to support this, and I would encourage a green vote. We have got to give our local communities more input. They are the ones that know the best of how to represent their community. I have people that are texting me right now that are looking forward to the full legalization, but they are desperate for local control. And so I would encourage a green vote on the Robbins Amendment.
Any further discussion? Representative Scraba.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you about the cities and townships. Being a mayor, past mayor, I would like to be able to have an opportunity to vote on this as a community. I can see why maybe perhaps a county would not. I mean, the county represents all of us inside, but the local units of government, a city, a township, we should be able to decide if we want to sell this or not. When alcohol came, when it first came, they had the same opportunity, and the state regulated it by how many bars could be in this community and how it was set up like that. But each community voted on how many they wanted, and I think that's reasonable. That's one of the things I'm looking for me to come and support this bill. I want to support this, but I really think that the local community should have a say. A friend of mine gave me an example. It's like a candy bar. You know, you can buy them anywhere you want. You should be able to buy marijuana everywhere you want. But a candy bar is different. You know, it is a product, and you should be able to go. I look at our tourism community, what I represent, and I truly believe that from what I've talked to and the people in Canada, when it first got legalized, there were thousands of stores selling marijuana. Now there's hundreds. And what happened is the market will determine where the stores are going to be and what's going to happen. I mean, each community might want it, but I think if we give the cities and the townships, it'll settle itself out. It'll be decided who gets what, where, how, and that should be part of this bill. And I look forward to a green vote. Thank you.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have been listening, but I don't think I heard anyone talk about the fact that, you know, there is actually a really pragmatic reason for local control over this, and that's that our local cities are going to bear the brunt of the consequences of this. When there are increased public safety needs, those costs are covered by our local municipalities. They are the ones paying for additional law enforcement time. They are the ones paying for our local jails, who are going to need to house people who have a problem, who are driving intoxicated. There is a cost to our local communities, which is exactly why our local communities should have control over whether or not they choose to incur those costs for the community. Local control is a basic principle that most of us agree with on both sides of the aisle. Most of us believe that our local communities should be able to make these decisions for themselves. You know, we talked about how in committee, you know, we have a lot of really small towns around this state, and a lot of those small towns have unique identities. They have a community that does care, that is unique to their local city or township. And I get it, the big cities don't have that quite as much, although certainly they make attempts to do so, but that sense of community can get a little bit lost. But in these small towns where there is a real sense of identity and community, it could be that they just don't want it. And guess what? They shouldn't have to. If their local elected representatives, and if the local constituents and people who live there don't want it, they shouldn't have to have it. It's just silly for us to force a community to take this on when, one, they don't want it, and two, they certainly don't want the costs associated with it. This is a great amendment. Vote yes.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if Representative Stevenson would yield for a question.
He will yield. Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Stevenson, I offered this same amendment in Commerce Committee. I know this bill made probably 12 stops, maybe more, after Commerce, so I've lost track of the different iterations of the bill, and I think you're on the 10th engrossment, so I know the bill changed. At the time, as I recall, there was not even a provision that would allow a city to issue a license for this, which meant they could put no restrictions. We do offer the ability for cities in our state statute to offer licenses for tobacco and for liquor. What is the current status of what's in the bill?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Dowd, the bill actually requires these retail-facing businesses to get local licenses. They have to grant a local license if the license is granted by the state, but it's an enforcement mechanism. As I mentioned, there's a careful balance here between wanting some elements of local control and an ability to enforce and make sure the rules are being followed, but not allowing opt-outs. So the bill does require a local license now.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if he would continue to yield, I would like to know, are they able to make some revenue off of that? Can they charge a license fee? Can they set specific hours? Can they deny a license?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Dowd, taking the last question first, no, they cannot deny a license if the license has been granted by the state. They can suspend the license if there's evidence that they find the person is selling an illegal product or selling to minors, et cetera, but they can't deny it straight up. You asked about hours. They can set hours limitations in the bills, and I believe Representative Nash maybe offered an amendment to constrain that further to allow more hours impact. Sorry about that. And your first question was about fees. And yes, they can charge a licensing fee. We spell it out in the statute. It's 50% of the amount that the state can charge.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative. I appreciate the clarification. And it was somebody was talking over here in the alcove, so that's why I was having trouble hearing you. It wasn't your fault. If members should really pay attention to this, if we're going to let local municipalities offer licenses, it's not that we're letting them offer it, it's we're requiring them to issue a license. They have no choice. I mean, they have to issue the licenses. And as so many other members said so eloquently, we shouldn't force a municipality to do this if they don't want to do it in their city. And we should let them set the restrictions that they feel are necessary for this. So I would ask members to vote in favor of this amendment. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 59 ayes and 69 noes, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Robbins moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A102.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, members. I won't belabor it, but it's another local control amendment. This one instead takes a population approach. So it says based on the size of the population, cities over 10,000, cities over 5,000, cities over 2,500 or up to 2,500, they have certain amounts of licenses that they could issue. So I, again, for all the reasons already discussed, urge a green vote, and I ask for a roll call.
Representative Robbins requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. There is an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Robbins moves to amend her amendment to House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A116.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, members. The amendment to the amendment just puts a little bit of a finer point on this. And it, in addition to the different tiers of cities and their populations, it also has a sentence saying that the definition of reasonable restrictions that local governments can impose that's in the current bill, reasonable restrictions include but are not limited to standards regarding noise, smell, odor, hours of operation, and location. This, again, was something suggested to me by the cities and counties. They have grave concerns about how this bill is going to impact the quality of life in their community, and they want to be able to regulate things like this, and they are asking for this. They do not support what's going on here today, but they want to at least be able to protect the quality of life in their cities as they see fit, and they're asking for this. So please vote green. Oh, and I'd like a roll call on the amendment to the amendment.
Representative Robbins requests a roll call on the amendment to the amendment. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, I oppose the underlying amendment, and the amendment to the amendment I don't think gets me to support, but we often extend courtesy to authors to get the amendments or bills in the shape they'd like to consider it, so I'm fine with a yes vote. I'd ask members to vote yes on the amendment to the amendment, but as a preview, I will be asking for a no vote on the underlying amendment.
Further discussion on the amendment to the amendment. Representative Robbins, did you want to withdraw your roll call?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, I withdraw the roll call on the amendment to the amendment, but not the underlying amendment.
All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment to the amendment is adopted. On the underlying Robbins amendment, Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Robbins, as I indicated, I asked for a no vote on this. Again, it's another local control issue, and again, we have a careful balance in this bill that this amendment would disrupt, so I'd ask for a no vote.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As members, we have gone over this. This is what our communities are asking for. Please support your local community and support the amendment. Thank you.
Representative Scraba.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the author yield to a question, please?
The author of the bill or the author of the amendment?
Mr. Stevenson. Representative
He will
Stevenson.
yield. Representative
Thank
Scraba.
you. I missed it before. I wanted to ask, being a small town and the license, you brought up the license, the city issues a license. Do we as a city have to print the license, do all the license, make the license up? Do we have a committee that reviews licenses? Do we do all of that? Or is it a state license that runs through the community? I'm curious.
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Scraba, the bill contemplates that the bulk of the licensing work is done at the state level, so they'll be the ones reviewing whether the person has met all the things they need to do to obtain a license, but they also need to achieve a local license and apply for that. As I mentioned when I was talking with Representative Dow, the city does not have discretion to offer that license if the state has approved a license, but they can then suspend the license if the business is not in compliance with any of various state or local regulations.
Representative Scraba.
Thank you. I'm still confused because small communities cannot or do not have the ability to have licenses. I like a business license. There's a lot of communities that you just show up in town and you start a business. There's no city business license. There's nothing. It's just there. So what I'm curious about, Madam Speaker, if I could ask him, continue the question.
He will yield. Representative Scraba.
How does a community that doesn't have licenses issue a license?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Scraba, the bill says that the applicable local unit of government has to issue the license. So in some communities, maybe that's a higher level of government like a county. But in most places where you have a city unit of government that would license a liquor store or a tobacco shop, they would be the ones issuing that local license.
Representative Scraba.
Once again, maybe I'm not clear on the way I'm asking the question. Would he yield?
He will yield. Representative Scraba.
So if a city does not have a license and the county is the next up, does the city have to go to the county to get the license for the business?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Scraba, no. It's the applicable unit, local unit of government, so if it's the county doing the licensing, the county would license.
Madam Chair, it's, again, sorry, Madam Speaker, it is getting late for me too, but one of the things I'm really concerned about is I want local control. I would like to see the license. I would like to see that. Representative New Brindley brought up the fact that the law enforcement and everybody that has to deal with the businesses in the community, it is a unique business. I'm not saying it's a bad business. It's a unique business. It's an opportunity perhaps to move forward in something that should have been done a long time ago. But I'm curious. I'll save it for the other one. But thank you, Madam Chair. I urge everyone to vote for Representative Robbins' bill. Thank you.
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Scraba, so whoever is doing the licenses for a business like a liquor store, a tobacco shop, whether that's the city or the county, they would be the ones issuing the license. I was told maybe that might clarify the point.
Representative Scraba.
Thank you. That clarifies it a lot because we do issue tobacco licenses and those sort of things. So we're just a pass-through. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Swedzinski and then Representative Robbins. Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Stevenson yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Stevenson, just kind of, perusing as this debate's happening here on the House floor and kind of surrounding Representative Robbins' amendment and amendment to the amendment as it was applied to the bill. What if we have a local unit of government, whether that's a county or a city, that, locally elected officials, they ran on a really firm foundation of saying, you know what, fly a kite, legislature. We're not interested in issuing this license that we shall issue. What if we don't? What are the penalties on those local elected officials and folks from the city councils?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Swedzinski, there are a number of cases where we do limit the ability of a local unit of government. I would make an analogy to if you blatantly violate zoning law and just say, I'm sorry, your business, we know you have a right to build this under the applicable zoning law, but we just don't like your business and we don't want it here. The business is able to go to court and get the decision reversed. And I would expect a similar thing to happen here.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So you're expecting if a city is refusing to do what the legislature wants here today and being forcibly, put a license to these businesses, that you feel that, that'll encourage that particular business entity will sue that local unit of government and then through the courts potentially force them to do that.
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Swedzinski, if they're not following the law, I would expect the courts would instruct them to follow the law.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. So, you think about that. Here we are. We have an opportunity to accept Representative Robbins' amendment that, quite frankly, is at least a little bit of something in between. It's not an outright saying you got to do this, you got to do that, but it's at least looking at a population equation that would allow cities like say, you know what, we don't even have a police department. This isn't a good fit for our community. You know what we're going to do? Open them up for litigation. You're going to take a small town, the state legislature is going to take a small town and say, you know what, we know what's best for you. Even though each person on that city council says, you know what, I don't want anything to do with this. There is no way on my grandma's grave that I'm going to allow this business to be in the hometown that I grew up in, that I was born in, that I want to support, because I understand the damage that these types of businesses are going to be coming into my community. And you're going to open them up to litigation. They're going to probably lose a court case. There's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars or $10,000 of court case fees. And probably some civil court that they're going to say, well, you just don't like us. You don't want us to be around here, blah, blah, blah. Folks, here we go again. State government knows best. State government knows best. Your cities like the Robbins Amendment. There are 800 some cities in this great state. Each of them probably have 5 or more city council folks. And we're going to tell those elected officials, those fire chiefs, those folks that woke up on a Monday morning or a Wednesday morning after the election, weren't running for election, and found themselves their mayor or they're a city councilman or woman. And we're going to say, you know what? Stick this bill in your pipe and smoke it and take it. Because we know best. We giggle on this House floor, but that's what you're telling these small towns to do with this bill. We're going to stick it down your throat, and you're going to like it. And if you don't like it, and you say, fly a kite, state legislature, we're going to open you up to litigation. That's leadership. Loud and clear. Vote for the Robbins Amendment.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the discussion, members. Local control really is important, and our cities want it. But I also want to point out a little bit of the hypocrisy in this bill, because the state wants to make sure that cities can't refuse these licenses and that cities can't revoke these licenses. But they also don't want to have them limited by churches or limited by odor or other things. But it says right in the statute that it can't be within 1,000 feet of the Capitol or the Capitol grounds. So apparently we don't want it around here. And then if you turn over to the next page, it says, notwithstanding anything in the bill, the state shall not issue any license to any cannabis business to operate in Indian country. So we cannot impose this on the tribes, and I understand that. They're sovereign nations. But we are not giving our cities the same respect. And members, our cities are asking to be partners. They are on the hook for the enforcement, for the compliance, and yes, they are able now to have this retail registration, and they are able to suspend it, and they are able to charge some fees. But the cities I've talked to say it won't be nearly enough to make up for their law enforcement costs of compliance. So members, please vote to support your local community and vote green on the amendment. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll.
Kind of odd.
There being 60 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Nash moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A107.
The member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would request a roll call on the
Representative
A107.
Nash requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Nash.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Stevenson, I always love quoting people back to themselves in debate. At the beginning of your debate, you said, Minnesotans deserve to make their own decisions. That's what you said in the intro of your speech. And the A107 is actually modeled after existing statute, and we've talked about this briefly, but I actually want to delve into this a little bit deeper tonight. So 340A-.416 actually says that the body of the 107 would be that if you have 30% of the persons voting in the last city election or 200 registered voters residing in the city, whichever is less, the city can place a referendum on the next ballot, and that if the majority of the people voting in that referendum decide that they do not wish to have a dispensary located in their city, that becomes the law. Now, 340A.416 was actually utilized, if my memory serves me correct, from State Government Finance Committee, that it was in the city of Cokato. And they actually decided for a period of time that they wished to be a dry city. So that's how they arrived at the decision to become a dry city. And what they did is they did the referenda. What I'm offering to you, Chair Stevenson, is this, because the local control pieces, I think, could best be summed up in that you are open to restricting time, place, and manner, but you're not giving the cities any opportunity to say, you know, we don't really want one of these here. And you and I have talked about this, and your principal argument is that it's going to expand the illicit market. And I don't know that we've ever actually had any conversation back and forth about the veracity of that argument or specific examples of that, because as I think Representative Swedzinski said earlier, that many of the cities that have done this under the auspices of not or eliminating the black market, they still have the black market there. And I can corroborate that because a friend of mine from high school is the police chief of a city in the Denver metro area. And what he has told me on repeated occasions is, Jim, this was the worst thing that we could have done. Because even though we have a regulated market, the cartels and those people who are in the illicit market are still undercutting the price of the dispensaries, and it's making it effectively a cheaper black market. But back to this amendment, I think that what we're seeing is that a referendum is probably the most obvious vote that you could take as to whether or not you wanted to have something allowed in your city. Because the preponderance of people voting in the election have to say, nope, we really don't want one of these here. So I've been very thoughtful on how to craft this amendment. And I will tell you that everybody got at their desk, mine got water spilled on it, but there's a letter at your desk from what is this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different municipal organizations, and I will read them. League of Minnesota Cities, President of Municipal Legislative Commission, the Association of Small Cities, the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, the Association of Minnesota Counties, the President of Metro Cities, Metro Intercounty Association, and the Minnesota Rural Counties Association. Now, the people who are the signatories of this are council members from Bemidji, the mayor of Edina, the city administrator of Spicer, the mayor of Thief River Falls, a Ramsey County commissioner, a city manager in Coon Rapids, the commissioner or a commissioner in Washington County, and a commissioner in Pipestone County. These are the people who have been elected by various members of the communities that we all serve with these folks to say, we support local control. So along those lines, we have heard that many other states and cities have gone down this road, and Representative Stevenson doesn't prefer them. But I think that Michigan is a great example, because Michigan is a state with one of the lowest tax rates on cannabis, which is what you have. And they have no opt-out, but they are battling what they call a seemingly insurmountable battle with the long-entrenched black market. Let me read that again. They are fighting a seemingly insurmountable battle with a long-entrenched black market. Well, members, research is showing in Michigan that that's a problem. So I think that the idea of local control is similarly very interesting. You know, last week I had, I think it was the A37 on the housing bill, and it went down in flames. And I would say to many of you, in fact, a couple of you here in the chamber, that I'm going to give you an opportunity to put up a vote for local control. So to that end, Madam Speaker, would Representative Wolgamott yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Nash.
Nash. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Wolgamott, last week you voted no on my A37, ostensibly in the vein of wanting local control to reign preeminent. And this amendment, the 107, is providing an opportunity for local control to preserve. And the many organizations that have sent the letter, and I think you have a copy at your desk, they are saying, please vote on this amendment. We would like local control. Representative Wolgamott, you have St. Cloud as your principal city. Do you believe that the city of St. Cloud's City Council should be allowed to make the decisions on whether they have a dispensary located or multiple dispensaries located in the city of St. Cloud.
Representative Wolgamott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the question, Representative Nash. I think that the approach that is in the bill before us is the best approach.
Representative Nash.
Well, Madam Speaker, if Representative Wolgamott would continue to yield.
He will yield. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, that wasn't the question, Representative Wolgamott. The question was, do you believe that the City Council and voters in the city of St. Cloud should be allowed to have a vote, like on the A107, do you believe that they should have a vote as to whether or not a dispensary is located in the city of St. Cloud?
Representative
It's a yes or no
Wolgamott.
question.
I would remind you, Representative Nash, you can't ask him how he'll vote on the amendment. Representative Wolgamott.
I did
Again,
not ask
Madam
him how to
Speaker,
vote.
I would reiterate that I believe that the approach that is in the bill without this amendment is the best approach.
Representative Nash.
Well, okay. We'll move on. Would Representative Ream yield to a question?
She will yield. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Ream, before you came here, you were the member or a member of the Chanhassen City Council. And I know, and the League of Minnesota Cities representing the city of Chanhassen has said that they would like for an opportunity to have the local voice heard in this bill. And here's the thing. Please note, I have worked very hard to just constrain my comments to the lack of local control. So, Representative Ream, do you believe that the voters of the city of Chanhassen should have a voice as to whether or not something is located in their city, or do you not believe that?
Representative Ream.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Nash. I did look over that letter from the League of Minnesota Cities, and I didn't see the Chaska mayor or the Chanhassen mayor's name on it. So, and I have talked to the author about this bill, and I do think the way it's written makes sense. A couple things, you know, the fact that cities can zone where they want to have this. And we had, I don't know if you remember, but in our city we had an issue where a large liquor store wanted to have its business close to a school. And it was allowed because it was a private school. And I talked to the author about this, and he said that with this legislation, that would not be allowed. They're going to make this much stricter when we're looking at dispensaries. So I actually think the way this law is written has improved upon things. So I guess that's answering the question, hopefully. Thank you.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If Representative Ream would yield for one more question.
She will. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Ream, is the League of Minnesota Cities, or is the city of Chanhassen and Chaska represented by the League of Minnesota Cities down here at the Capitol in lobbying efforts?
Representative Ream.
I would assume so.
Representative Nash.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I will tell you, and this is not a gotcha, they are. So the League of Minnesota Cities has said that they would like local control. They do represent the cities of Chanhassen and Chaska, and I think that you can surmise from that that they would be sending you a message that they would like to have local control. Madam Speaker, would Representative Brand yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Nash.
Madam Speaker, Representative Brand, Mankato and St. Peter, I believe, are your principal cities. I think we can agree that we know that the League of Minnesota Cities does represent them here at the Capitol. The letter that you've received at your desk is urging for some notion of local control that is beyond what's in the bill. And I would ask, do you believe that the city and the people in Mankato and the people in the city of St. Peter should have a voice in this process as to whether or not a dispensary is located in their cities respectively?
Representative Brand.
Thank you for the, thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Nash. What I would say is that there are plenty of vacant locations in across the state where these locations could go, but there are zoning laws. And so I wouldn't say that a dispensary in any shape or form would end up in a residential zone. As a former city council member, I wouldn't say that it would end up in an industrial zone. And so that would only limit the commercial zone. And I do believe, as a former city council member, we did have control over where those commercial zones were located within those cities. And so I would assume that your question, although it's a bit kind of a confusing question when you think about it, because they already do have control over zoning across those cities. Again, going back to my 7 years of city council experience, we kind of had control over where those things could be located. In fact, when I was city council member in St. Peter, we actually added some additional commercial zones in St. Peter, but I can't imagine where we would want to put some of these things in different locations. Now, it is kind of weird because we do have a hospital in the industrial zone, and in our industrial zone, we do have a couple of different mixed use things, but I think that we're trying to use the land to the best ability that we have in those cities, like in St. Peter, where I represented again for 7 years. And so I think to get to the bottom of your question, I think that, yeah, they do have local control. I was there, and we were part of that back in those days when I was there. Thank you.
Representative Nash.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And I will tell you, I rarely presume the intent of my questions myself, but Chair Stevenson has said on a number of occasions that there are reasonable limitations that we have in this bill. But I will point out to members that we are a Dillon state rule, and that means that unless it is expressly stated, local governments can't do anything that is not provided by the statute that we have in the bills that get passed into law. So to that point, it is not expressly stated in the bill, and subsequently they would not have a voice. But if you do it by referenda, I think that this provides a very good voice for the local people to say, by passage of a referenda, we just don't want to have this here. I don't think that's asking a tremendous amount. What we're saying is, what is exactly set up there over our rostrum, is that the voice of the people is the voice of God. Let's listen to the voice of the people. So I'm sure the chair is going to tell you to not vote for this, but I will wait for that because maybe he's changed his mind. Apparently he hasn't, but I'd like to hear from him. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Nash, I appreciate the amendment, but as I have said before, the bill strikes a careful balance between the state's interest and local control, and so this would disrupt that balance. I'd ask for a no vote.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to clear up a couple things from that discussion. It was stated that the bill provides for local cities to have zoning ability, and it does not. It says that a local unit of government may adopt reasonable restrictions on time, place, and manner of operation. And I tried, and then it says they can restrict within 1,000 feet of a school, daycare, the Capitol or the Capitol grounds, or a public park that includes a playground or athletic field. The amendment that we voted down that included the amendment to the amendment, members, allowed for a local land use compatibility study to ensure that these businesses would not be located in a residential area. It also would have expressly stated that cities could have provided reasonable restrictions for noise, smell, odor, hours of operation, and location. So members, you already voted down in one vote the local control that our cities and counties are asking for. So the Nash Amendment is an opportunity to give them their local voice through the referendum process so that they can decide what works for their communities. Please support the Nash Amendment.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Joy yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Joy. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Joy, if memory serves me, you came here from being a mayor in your city. I'm presuming that you have spoken to many of your constituents. And as a mayor, former mayor, as myself and many others in this chamber, what is it that you see as the principal defect of this bill as it relates to local control?
Representative Joy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I find it interesting, we've had discussion when I was mayor about, we've seen other cities ban menthol in their cities. They think that's a good idea for their city, not forced from the state to say ban menthol. It was a decision at the local level, but yet we come to this and we can't let the cities decide that this is a good idea or take it to a vote. To me, I think we should, this amendment you're offering is a good amendment. I think we should vote green on this amendment. When you look at how local control, knowing their cities, we're not even taking it to the county level. We're keeping it on the local level So it's the citizens in that town, you know, and when you bring up if they have law enforcement in place or not, who's going to manage this, who's going to do it, you know, schools, what it is. You know, there's so much to this bill, you just wonder that when it says within 1,000 feet of a child care. So now if I do have an opportunity in my small town to get another child care, but it's within that 1,000 feet of that new facility we have, I have to deny that license for that child care facility because it's too close. We're going to have a lot of issues with this. Thank you.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Joy. You know, in committee debate, the Chair Stevenson said that one of his concerns with my amendment was that it would strip away the enforcement requirement. And I pointed out in committee, and I'll point it out here again, that this doesn't absolve the cities of enforcement, because it doesn't. What it simply says is that this is a mechanism, an on-ramp, if you will, for cities to have a referendum to simply say, we'll enforce the laws, but we don't want a dispensary here. Because I think that it's not really an unrealistic expectation that many cities around our state, because you can drive for many, many, many hours. Representative Burkle, he's here, well, there he is, has a very long drive. I think it's 6 hours. Well, you can drive for 6 hours, and you might hit a couple cities along the way that would like to say, we don't want one of these. So I'd like to read, Madam Speaker, a passage from the letter that was submitted that I referenced just a minute ago, and all of you have at your desk. And I'll start it off here. It says, collectively, our organizations have provided feedback, testimony, and letters throughout this session regarding House File 100. We are appreciative for Chair Stevenson's addition of local registration requirement, but, and in bold letters, still have concerns regarding the lack of local government positions within the bill. Specifically, local governments center our requests on the following items. One, and first, meaningful local control. That's a really big item. The second one, and the last item they say, is recognition of costs throughout revenue sharing. I'm focusing on meaningful local control. I appreciate the amendment that we added in State Government Finance, Chair Stevenson, around some of the things that were added, but there really isn't the voice of the cities that are here. There is no meaningful local control. The people that live in pick a city don't have a voice in whether or not they get to have a dispensary. Now, mind you, I think that many people, if it were put to a vote, they'd say, yeah, we'd like this. But I think that as much as I recognize that, you have to recognize that there would be cities that say we would prefer not to. I don't think that that is a far-flung notion. So, members, if you voted no on my amendment last week, and yep, you voted my amendment down, here now is your opportunity to do the same thing again, to be the voice of local control, and that's what this is all about. So if you voted no last week, I really hope to see that you vote green on this, because the cities and counties are asking for meaningful local control. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Novotny moves to amend House File Number 100, the 10th engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A103.
The member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Speaker Hortman. My amendment is a simple bill. I was contacted by a member of one of the Metro Sheriff's Office who wish to remain anonymous and express concerns they have about this bill and the continued work that they're going to have to do with the ongoing record expungement once the cannabis expungement boards kick in. And I know there is some funding in there, but with their examination of the bills, they believe that they will still have cost built in.
I asked them to provide me with the estimate of how much they will have to have for labor involved going forward, and we came up with a simple extrapolation of that divided by the population in the state, and that's where we came up with the request for the funding. We took that money out of the cannabis workforce grants, and this money will be put forward into an account in the Department of Revenue. When the Cannabis Expungement Board does their record reporting in January on how many records that they have had to seal at a local level, the local governments will get that information, and then the money will be distributed to help cover the cost of this bill. That is my amendment, Madam Speaker, and I request a roll call.
Representative Novotny requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Novotny. As you mentioned, there is money in the bill for local governments. There's a variety of different sources of money in the bill for local governments. I'm going to ask for a no vote already. I mean to say, I'm going to ask for a no vote on this amendment. The way that you have funded this amendment is by deleting the economic development grants in the bill, which I think are an important part of the bill. And for that reason, I'm going to ask for a no vote.
Further discussion? Representative Novotny.
Thank you. And members, this is something we can do. Vote green.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
No.
We are not.
Third reading, House File Number 100, as amended.
Third reading as amended. Discussion to the bill. The member from Ramsey, Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As some of you know from our talks in committee, my parents are libertarian hippies, and they have been anticipating and waiting for cannabis legalization since the 70s. Now, my interest in legalization is maybe a little less self-serving because cannabis is not my drug of choice. I personally like a good single malt scotch. But my interest in House File 100 is primarily related to the failure of the war on drugs and how that's impacted our Black and brown communities. Black Americans are 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana charges than their white peers. Black Americans are nearly 6 times more likely to be incarcerated for drug-related offenses than their white counterparts. Almost 80% of people serving time for a federal drug offense are Black or Latino. And in state prisons, people of color make up 60% of those serving time for drug charges. And for those of you who doubt the purposeful connection between the war on drugs and the community of color, let me quote President Nixon's policy advisor, John Ehrlichman. "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or Black, but by getting the public to associate hippies with marijuana and Blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing them both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know that we were lying about drugs? Of course we did." All of those arrests, charges, and convictions have a real and direct impact on individuals, holding people back from being full participants in our economy, keeping them out of lucrative employment, disrupting child custody, breaking apart families, evicting residents, seizing property on pretext, and needlessly escalating the risk of violence in police encounters. Philando Castile is dead because of the presence of the smell of marijuana was enough to convince an officer that he was worthy of deadly force. His death left a hole in our community. The students at J.J. Hill, his girlfriend, his family, he didn't deserve that. He died right on the edge of my district. Today, we take a step towards making certain that that never happens again. Many of the harms the war on drugs have wrought on our communities have no simple remedy, but the expungement provisions laid out in this bill will go a long way to correcting many of the harms and consequences that we've needlessly inflicted upon our own citizens. This law will remove a significant barrier to gainful employment, child custody, home ownership, and rentals. As a lawyer, I know that the ability of the state to criminalize activities is its greatest power and responsibility. Criminal justice is a blunt and terrible instrument that strips away years of a person's life in a single instance. It must be used sparingly, but for decades we've chosen to wield this power with far too much enthusiasm and far too little regard for the consequences it wreaks on our communities. As Minnesotans, we should lead the way in criminal justice reform, reserving the state's greatest and most terrible power for only great and terrible things. Today, we take an important step in reforming our laws and creating a more just and equitable Minnesota. Please vote green.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Finke.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the bill. I want to just follow up on the comments that Representative Hollins made about the historical injustices of the war on drugs, and I want to make sure that we understand that this is not our history, this is our present. We heard tonight that cannabis was effectively legal in the state of Minnesota, and I just want to make sure we know that according to the BCA in 2021, 6,000 people were arrested for marijuana-related crimes in the state of Minnesota. 90% of those were for simple possession. The same data reports that of that group, 5 times more likely to be arrested for simple possession if you are black than if you are white. Marijuana is not effectively decriminalized in the state of Minnesota. It is effectively decriminalized in the state of Minnesota for white people. We absolutely need this bill. Tens of thousands of people will have their expungement, their records expunged, but tens of thousands more will not need it in the future. Thank you, Representative Stevenson, for your attention to this need. This is an absolute necessity in the state of Minnesota.
The member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the author of the bill yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And to the author, I know that you made some allowances for Minnesota permit to carry holders, but I have one principal question, and it is from that law. It is subdivision 2 of the permit to carry law. It is at least 21 years of old or a citizen of permanent residence in the United States completes a various list of things, and number 9 says that if they are precluded from any federal law, and Madam Speaker, my question to the author is marijuana still a Schedule I drug federally, and would consuming it be an abrogation of federal law?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Nash, the answer to the first question is yes, it's still Schedule I. The answer to your second question is I do not believe this has been a barrier to licenses in other states, in the now 2 states that have legalized cannabis.
Well,
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, one of our cherished members on both sides of the aisle here, Representative Rod Hamilton, when he entered the medical marijuana program, was precluded from having his permit to carry. And that's because it's a federal Schedule I drug, and he was not allowed to do that because that's a federal law, and it says here in the statute that Minnesota does not allow, or it could not allow, as one of the criterion for evaluation, for that to kick him out of the system. So I just want folks who value the ability for a permit to carry, and I think there are some on your side of the aisle that feel very strongly about that, to recognize that this bill does not fix that. This bill does not even come close to addressing the federal requirement of that. And that should be a cautionary tale for you as you think about voting on this bill. Madam Speaker, I will bring the body's attention to line 175.4 in the bill, subdivision 4, grants to individuals. The commissioner shall award grants of the amount of ... That is not a defined amount of money in the bill. It is a blank appropriation in the bill. And for that reason, Madam Speaker, I move that House File 100 be re-referred back to the Committee on Ways and Means for that specific reason. We cannot pass a bill off this floor with a blank appropriation. I would request a roll call.
Representative Nash moves to send the bill back to committee and requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, I ask that the House be allowed to meet past midnight.
Representative Stevenson moves that the House be allowed to meet past midnight. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. Discussion on the motion to return the bill to committee. Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, I ask that the members reject this motion. Representative Nash called this a blank appropriation. I'm sure he misspoke. It's not an appropriation. That language doesn't appropriate any money. There is an appropriation to this section later in the bill that is not blank. This is a limit that's not in the bill, so it doesn't say that it says that the agency can award grants of up to, and then there's a blank in the bill functionally saying that there's not a limit to how much money the agency can grant, but they are appropriated money in Article 9 of the bill. There's no blank appropriation in the bill.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will members read the line? Grants to individual. The commissioner shall award grants of undefined number. It's an undefined number in the bill, and we have dealt with this many, many times. I brought snacks to committees that pointed out to people that there were more dots in some of your bills than there were in the box of candy that I brought to committee. That's sloppy work. And I'm sure that the author missed this one. I did not miss this one. This is not something that we should allow to have happen. This is not proper procedure for how we pass things off of this floor. You don't do blank appropriations. You don't do blank grants. That is not how we do this. Members, I would urge a green vote. I would love to hear from some of my other colleagues about how this is not how we do things here in the Minnesota House of Representatives. I would urge a green vote.
Seeing no further discussion on the motion, the clerk will take the roll on the motion. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 71 nays, the motion does not prevail. The bill is before us. The member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I move to table House File 100, and will note for members in the gallery that we will be taking up the bill first thing tomorrow for those who would like to return, and that we will complete the bill and vote on it tomorrow. We have a House rule that we don't meet past midnight to allow for the safety of members.
Motion to table is not debatable. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. House File 100 is laid on the table. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there is no objection, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail. Announcements. Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 11 a.m. Tuesday, April 25th, 2023.
Representative Long moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 11 a.m. Tuesday, April 25th, 2023. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. Representative Long.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Long moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until 11 a.m. Tuesday, April 25th, 2023.